my presentation about making hay as I know it. And all of the pictures, except for like 2, are original. So, okay. So what are we going to be talking about here? First of all, what is hay? It's a little more complicated than you might think, and there's a few misconceptions that we're going to cover. And then I want to talk about how does one actually make hay? And there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. It's also, a lot of people think of it kind of a seasonal thing, but it's almost a year-round project. And it's surprisingly reliant on good luck. And I think, okay. So hay versus straw. They're both in a bale and they look very similar. Straw is like the golden hay you would sit on at a pumpkin patch or on a hayride, okay? And it's actually not hay. It's sort of, like it's what comes after a grain harvest. It's the dead plants condensed into a bale. And it's not worth very much money, and it's also not very good for eating or really anything. It's kind of a cheap afterthought. So that's not what we're talking about in this presentation. We will be talking about hay. There's some hay. You can see they almost look the same, but they're very different. This is fresh and then dried grass condensed into a bale. And so it still has all the nutrients that the animals can eat, and it's much heavier, which sucks. And it's also pretty valuable. You'd be surprised. One bale is about $8 to $10. And disclaimer, hay is different. Literally every single farm has a different situation. So for us in swim, we're right on this water, along the ocean, so it's really hard to get the hay dry enough to bale, and it's really sensitive to the weather because we're so marginal. And also the fields are all small and weird shapes, so you have to have small equipment. But out here, kind of near Spokane, in Eastern Washington, you get so hot, the hay's so dry, they have to bale at night, or they'll lose the crop. And their fields are massive, so they have much larger equipment, much larger scale, which means they make more money. But so number 1, it's wintertime, you're getting ready. And this obviously doesn't picture winter, but go through your equipment. That's the most important thing, because stuff will break in the field, and you want to start in a cushy machine, so that by the time you're done, you still have something that works. And you can also have backup machines, like have an extra tractor or an extra baler. That's really helpful. Walk around your fields, look for debris and stuff. Make sure there's no hay on the ground from the last season. That'll ruin your season hay. And make some friends who can work for you. Number 2, absolutely has to have hot, sunny weather. You don't have it. This is an example here this week. This is weather you do not want. Fog, hay gets wet. Rain, hay gets wet. Clouds, hay doesn't dry. Gotta be hot and sunny. And farmers are always talking about the weather, and that's why. Because if you don't have the weather, you cannot make hay. Make hay while the sun shines, that's what they say. And eventually, you just gotta go for it. It's probably not gonna be perfect, but you gotta send it, you gotta round up your labor, and also get a golf cart. Because there's somebody who's gonna be running around helping people. Like if somebody gets thirsty, you don't want them to stop, because it slows everybody else down. So have your golf cart, and you can run around the farm getting people things they need, or getting fuel, or that kind of thing. And then how do you cut the hay in the beginning? And I always thought, growing up, that you just use like a big lawnmower. And that is not what you use. You use this thing called a swather. Here it is. As you can see, it articulates. But it cuts every piece of hay one time, whereas a lawnmower is going to mulch it. And so if you swat like a lawn, for example, you have a fantastically larger amount of grass than you'd ever believe there. And so as you can see, it's just these huge amounts of material that come out of the swather. And it's also important to have a good swather, like the person operating it, because if they miss, you still have grass standing up in the middle of the field. And it's very embarrassing. Somebody drives by and I see just like lines. I've seen it before, it's terrible. And then you gotta rake it. So after it's been allowed to dry a few days, I don't have a great picture here, unfortunately, but the raking, because our climate's so moist, you have to have the hay spread out to dry. And you would never want to bale that because the baler's pretty small. You'd be driving around all day long. And so you have to get it into these heaps called windrows. And I don't know where that word comes from. I looked it up and it was inconclusive. But here you can kind of see these are ready to be baled, and this hay is still on the ground. It also flips it over once with help of drying further. And it's important to have a good raker because the raker needs to think with the baler in mind. Because the baler, as we'll get to next, is sensitive. All right, so what is baling? This is the part where the hay actually gets pressed into a saleable product, which is the bale. And these are these are my 2 unoriginal pictures, but baling is really neat to watch. Like, it's pretty entertaining, but it also takes absolutely forever. It's by far the slowest process. It breaks all the time. You have to be very adept baler operator, and it's expensive and it's easy to break. And this is the machine that carries under moisture. So if your hay is wet, you just flat out can't do it. If the hay is too dry, also has problems. If the hay has too many weeds, also has issues. I mean, you really just got to be on it with the baler. And then once you're all said and done, you'd be quick to take a break, except now your bales are on the ground, which means they're picking moisture up from the ground. So if you, maybe in Eastern Washington this is different, but at least where I am, if you just leave your hay on the dirt, it'll be ruined in a few days. And so that's where this machine comes in. This is the bale wagon. And it's like an automated pickup system. So this is called the snout. This is actually a picture of my boss crashing it. But the bale goes in the snout, which is supposed to be flat, and it kind of gets sucked up, and it automatically stacks it in here. And when it's said and done, this is a full one right here. It's me. When it's said and done, it tips it back and makes a perfect stack, theoretically. This machine, least reliable on the farm. It's very complicated, it's hard to drive, and but it's also really cool. And the barn. So you gotta get it in the barn. That's the one part I did not do, because it is so challenging to back the bale wagon into the barn and get a stack. And also in the barn, there's a number of hazards. First of all, I guess you gotta figure out how to get the hay in there safely. You gotta stack it so it doesn't fall, which is falling hay. Clients will go in there to select their hay, and bales will fall and injure them. So it's a big liability. Like, you gotta make sure, like, they know, this is a hazardous area. And if you do somehow manage to bale moist hay, it'll catch on fire. As the hay ferments, because it's in the stack, it'll get so hot, it'll actually burn your barn down. So that's you gotta be careful there with that. And finally, sales. There's a liability in transportation, okay? And so we don't load people. I mean, we load people, we don't strap it. That's what I'm trying to say. So this guy came in, and 3 people collectively decided this was the best way to strap this load. This was the world record for most bales on a pickup truck, in case you're wondering. And as far as money goes, it's about $8 to $10 per bale, small bale in my area. There's several different kinds of bales, but the little square ones. And it takes us about a week to make between 1,500 and 2,000 bales. And so if you average that out, that's $12,000 to $16,000. So if you really want to make a living, I think it's like 50 acres that makes that much. So you'd either have to have a significantly larger amount of fields or do this 3 or 4 times a year, which in areas that it rains or you have heavy soil is possible. So basically repeat that like 4 times and you have an income. And conclusion, here's my steps. And here's a good quote. Farming is one of the most dangerous occupations in America. You can read that if you want. But essentially, I don't know if you noticed, every single one of those pieces of equipment is complicated, expensive, fragile, and dangerous. And so, farming is super interesting and awesome, and I love it. I have so much fun farming. But it is simply not worth it if you're not enjoying it. So, next time you see somebody making bales, think about, what step are they on? Is the weather good? Are they going to be freaking out here because it's about to rain or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool.